My brother called me a freeloader in front of his groomsmen. 20 minutes after his ranger best man saw the scar on my wrist, a Brigadier General opened the door. The fitting room occupied the top floor of a hotel near Fort Liberty. Gray suits hung from brass rails. Champagne chilled beside a long mirror, and Graham stood on a platform while a tailor adjusted his wedding jacket. I wore black trousers and a plain, long-sleeved blouse. The sleeves covered the scar on my left wrist. Graham raised his glass towards 6 men gathered around him. "My sister finally came," he announced. "Try not to let her near the open bar. She has freeloaded off this family long enough." 2 men laughed because they believed it was harmless teasing. Major Luke Brennan did not. I placed a blue folder on the fitting table. "I need to ask about an invoice charged to Valor House." Graham's smile weakened. "This is my wedding fitting. The payment description says adaptive housing renovations. Then speak to accounting on Monday. The vendor is your wedding venue." The room became quieter. Graham stepped down from the platform. "You came here to embarrass me over bookkeeping." "I came because the trustee report closes tomorrow." He turned toward his groomsmen. "This is what I live with. She stays on family property without paying rent, lets my charity support her, then questions every dollar spent on someone else. I pay every expense connected to my home, because I let you pretend you are independent." He moved closer. "Do not ruin my wedding because someone finally spent money on me." The tailor dropped a silver box of pins. It struck the floor and scattered beside my shoes. I knelt to help collect them. My cuff caught on the arm of a chair. The fabric pulled above my wrist. The scar appeared. It curved across the inside of my arm like a pale crescent, thick near the center and uneven where damaged nerves had required several surgeries. Luke stopped moving, his eyes fixed on it. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "were you at Cedar Gate?" I lowered my sleeve. I was. His face changed. 2:17 in the morning. "Yes." "The helicopter came down short of the landing zone." "Yes." He looked at my hand. "You held pressure on a ranger's femoral artery during the evacuation." I did not answer immediately. Graham laughed. "Do not encourage her. She likes people thinking she was some kind of hero." Luke turned toward him. "What did you say her name was?" "Jocelyn Arden, Joss." Luke looked back at me. "Colonel Arden." Graham rolled his eyes. "She is not even on active operational duty anymore. I am still serving. In a recovery program. I advised the Army's Wounded Service Member Transition Program." He faced the others. "She lives in a cottage owned by the charity I built. She has not commanded anything in years." Luke took out his phone. "I need to make a call." He walked into the hallway. Graham watched the door close. "Now you have upset my best man." I answered his question. "You could have said no." That would have been a lie. 11 years earlier, Operation Cedar Gate had begun with a damaged helicopter and a radio call broken by static. The aircraft carried a ranger team returning from a nighttime mission. It lost power during approach and struck the ground before reaching the medical landing zone. I was the medical operations officer coordinating evacuation. When the first recovery vehicle failed to reach the wreckage, I joined the second team. Luke was trapped near the torn side of the fuselage. Metal had opened his leg above the knee, and blood soaked through every field dressing placed over it. A twisted panel cut my wrist while I helped pull him free. I felt the injury but did not look at it. Luke kept fading in and out. At one point, he said he was too tired to continue. I pressed both hands over the wound and told him, "You do not get to quit before the aircraft arrives." He survived because the ranger beside him secured the tourniquet. A medic reopened his airway. The flight crew landed under dangerous conditions, and a surgical team waited at the other end. I never considered that survival mine to claim. The scar remained. So did the nerve pain. I kept it covered because strangers often ask questions that turned another person's worst night into casual conversation. Graham knew I had been injured. He never asked how. Our parents died within 18 months of each other. They left Graham and me a large property outside Southern Pines. He wanted to sell it to a developer. I wanted to turn it into housing for wounded service members learning how to live independently again. I donated my share of the land to a protected charitable trust. I added nearly $900,000 from savings investments and the sale of a second property. Federal and private grants funded wheelchair ramps, widened doorways, rehabilitation rooms, and adaptive kitchens. We named it Valor House. Because I still served and traveled frequently, Graham became executive director. I remained the controlling trustee. The cottage where I lived stood outside the donated parcel. I had retained it before creating the trust. I paid its taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance. Graham still told donors he allowed his injured sister to live there free. Then he began charging Valor House for my supposed support. The reports listed me as a long-term dependent resident. According to the books, the charity paid for my food, housing, transportation, and medical supervision. I had never received any of it. Whenever I questioned an expense, Graham used my injury against me. "You forget things." "I have nerve damage, not memory loss." "You become overwhelmed." "I review federal medical contracts for the Army." "You should be grateful I handle the difficult decisions." He removed my name from the organization's website. Photographs of the opening ceremony were cropped. A caption beneath one image identified me as an early resident supported by the Arden family. When I demanded a correction, he said donors preferred a simple story. One founder, one vision, one man saving wounded soldiers. The wedding became part of that story. Graham invited military donors, defense executives, and several recovering service members. The ceremony would be filmed as a tribute to Valor House. He told everyone he was paying for it personally. The blue folder in my hand showed otherwise. The door opened 20 minutes after Luke made his call. Brigadier General Dana Holloway entered first. Special Agent Imani Cross followed with a leather evidence case. Dana had commanded the Joint Medical Element during Cedar Gate. She had also signed the order appointing me to the Army Recovery Program. Luke stood behind them. Every man in the room came upright. Dana looked directly at me. "Colonel Arden." "General." Graham stepped forward. "General Holloway, I am Graham Arden. This is an unexpected honor." Dana did not take his hand. "Colonel, did you authorize an emergency withdrawal of $684,000 from Valor House?" "No, General." Imani placed a contract on the fitting table. The first page showed the name of Graham's wedding venue. The payment was $214,000. The accounting code described it as Wheelchair Accessible Residence Modernization. Mallory entered from the adjoining bridal suite while Imani read the description. She still wore a white fitting robe. "What is happening?" Graham moved toward her. "It is a misunderstanding involving the foundation." Imani opened the next document. An $87,000 payment had gone to a luxury travel company. The description read Overseas Rehabilitation Site Assessment. Mallory stared at Graham. You told me your company paid for the honeymoon. It did. Which company? He did not answer. Another $63,000 covered formal clothing, flowers photography, and entertainment. $320,000 went to a consulting company registered at Graham's home address. That company then paid several personal debts. Graham's face tightened. These expenses were approved as donor development activities. By whom, I asked. You. Imani produced an electronic authorization bearing my name. It stated that I approved every withdrawal. A second document recorded a board meeting in which I supposedly resigned because combat injuries had caused cognitive impairment. No such meeting occurred. No physician had ever made that diagnosis. Mallory took one step away from Graham. You said Joss left the foundation voluntarily. She did. I did not. Graham pointed at the documents. Her signature is there. I looked at Imani. Which authentication device approved the transactions? She opened the evidence case. Your physical trustee key. The small security device should have remained inside the locked safe at the Valor House administrative office. Only my key could create the approval code attached to those transfers. Graham folded his arms. She allowed me to use it. When? Months ago. Where? At the foundation. Imani placed several still images beside the contracts. The hallway camera showed Graham entering the trustee office after midnight. Another image showed him opening the safe. A third showed the security key in his hand. The dates matched the weeks I was receiving treatment at Walter Reed for complications from my wrist injury. He had removed the key, approved the transactions, then returned it before I came home. Dana lifted the false resignation. Colonel, did you resign from Valor House while hospitalized? No. Graham forced a laugh. She was heavily medicated. She may not remember every document. Imani turned to the final page. The organization's records claimed I had received more than $400,000 in living assistance over 5 years. Housing, meals, transportation, personal care. I had received none of it. The payments were routed through accounts controlled by Graham. He had called me a freeloader before his friends. Then he created records that billed wounded soldiers for the privilege of supporting me. Dana looked at the wedding contract, then at the suits hanging around us. Special Agent Cross, is this room part of the charged event? Yes, General. The groomsmen stopped touching their jackets. Mallory removed her engagement ring but kept it in her hand. Graham looked around the room as if someone else might restore the version of him they had believed 20 minutes earlier. No one did. Luke placed a dented Ranger Challenge coin on the table beside my false resignation. I knew the scar, he said. Imani touched the financial ledger. The scar identified the colonel. This tells us who has actually been living from her sacrifice. Graham had spent years calling me dependent. Now the invoices showed that his wedding, his debts, and his reputation all depended on money meant for people whose scars he used to raise donations. Imani asked everyone to remain in the fitting room until the contracts and electronic devices were preserved. Graham objected immediately. This is a private wedding event. Imani closed the evidence case. It became relevant to a federal grant investigation when the venue was billed as housing for wounded service members. Mallory still held her engagement ring. Did the foundation pay for all of this? Graham looked at her. The wedding was supposed to attract donors. You told me the money came from your consulting company. It did. The company that received $320,000 from Valor House. He did not answer. Luke removed his suit jacket and placed it across a chair. The other groomsmen began doing the same. One of them asked whether they should return the clothing. Imani said every vendor payment would be reviewed, but no guest was accused simply for believing Graham's explanation. That distinction mattered. Graham had surrounded himself with people who trusted the image he created. Their embarrassment was not evidence of guilt. Dana asked me to accompany her to a secure office at Fort Liberty. Before leaving, I picked up the Dented Ranger Challenge coin Luke had placed beside my false resignation. He stopped me. That belongs to you. I thought it belonged to your unit. It did. The edge carried a deep indentation from the crash. One side still showed the Ranger insignia. The other had been scratched by metal and heat. I mailed it to the hospital after Cedar Gate, Luke said. No one ever told me whether it reached you. I never received it. Then I have been carrying it for 11 years. Graham laughed without humor. Are we really turning this into a reunion story? Luke faced him. No. We are establishing why I recognize the woman whose name you removed from your own foundation. Graham's attorney arrived before we left. He advised Graham to stop speaking. For once, my brother listened. At the secure office, Imani began with the original trust documents. Retired Command Sergeant Major Ruth Delaney arrived carrying a brass key and a blue cloth-bound ledger. Ruth had managed the residence at Valor House since the first cottage opened. She hugged me carefully, mindful of my wrist. I should have called you sooner. What did you notice? Too many new rules, too many invoices I was not allowed to see. She placed the brass key in my hand. It opened the original administration building. My father used it before the property became Valor House. The blue ledger had belonged to him too. When I proposed the recovery community, he had written the first repair estimates inside it before his illness worsened. After his death, I used the same book to record my initial contribution. Land value, construction costs, accessibility modifications, private savings. The total exceeded $890,000. Ruth opened the ledger to the final signed page. You were never a resident receiving assistance, she said. You were the person who funded the first residence. Imani compared the handwritten ledger to the charity's current accounting system. Graham had created a different history. The organization's website said he founded Valor House alone after witnessing the struggles of wounded veterans. My donation appeared as an unspecified Arden family contribution. The cottage where I lived was described as foundation-owned dependent housing. Property records proved otherwise. The cottage remained outside the trust boundary. I paid every tax bill, insurance premium, utility charge, and repair expense from my personal account. Valor House still billed grant programs for my supposed care. The monthly entries included meals I never received, transportation I never used, and medical supervision that never occurred. Over 5 years, those false expenses exceeded $400,000. Where did the reimbursements go? I asked. Imani displayed the account trail. Most entered a management company, controlled by Graham. The company paid his personal credit card's vehicle lease, club membership, and private consulting expenses. He did not merely call me dependent. He used my combat injury as a billing category. A medical examiner reviewed the board minutes stating I had cognitive impairment. No doctor's letter supported the claim. My Walter Reed records describe nerve pain, reduced grip strength, and 2 corrective surgeries. They also documented intact judgment, memory, and executive function. On several dates when the board supposedly discussed my incapacity, no board meeting occurred. One date fell on a federal holiday. Another placed 2 directors in different states. A third meeting claimed Ruth attended. She had been inside Valor House during a plumbing emergency with 6 residents and a county inspector. I never signed these minutes, Ruth said. Her signature had been copied from an old safety report. The false documents were built from real fragments. My electronic approval came from the stolen trustee key. Ruth's signature came from a maintenance file. The medical language came from selected sentences in my treatment records. Graham understood that complete inventions attracted attention. He preferred lies assembled from pieces other people recognized. The wedding expenses were examined next. The $214,000 venue charge was coded as modernization of wheelchair-accessible residences. The venue had no residential units. The $87,000 honeymoon deposit was listed as an overseas rehabilitation assessment. The destination was a private island resort. The floral contract appeared as therapeutic landscape installation. The videographer was billed as a veteran outcomes documentation team. Formal wear became adaptive occupational clothing. Every description transformed celebration into care. The $320,000 transfer to Graham's shell company was divided among debts, wedding deposits, and a luxury vehicle reservation. Valor House still needed a roof replacement on the east residential wing. The approved repair estimate was $68,000. Graham delayed it twice, claiming grant funds had not arrived. The flower contract alone exceeded that amount. Imani opened an email sent to the communications staff. Keep Joss in long sleeves during donor events. People respond better when she looks dependent, not decorated. A second message said, Do not use Colonel. The foundation needs one founder. I read both without speaking. Ruth's face hardened. He told us the long sleeves were your preference. They were. But he made the preference useful to him. Yes. Luke met me outside the interview room later that evening. He brought 2 cups of tea because he remembered I disliked sweet coffee after night missions. We sat beneath a photograph of Fort Liberty's old hospital. He turned the Ranger coin between his fingers. I remember your wrist bleeding onto my uniform. I remember the flight medic correcting my hand position. You remember that... She was right. Luke smiled briefly. That is how I knew it was you. The scar. No, the fact that the person who saved us never told the story like she owned it. I looked at the damaged edge of the coin. You survived because many people refused to stop. You were one of them. I was. For years, I avoided even that simple acknowledgement. Accepting a place in the record was not the same as claiming the whole rescue. Luke placed the coin in my palm. You do not get to return this. The words echoed the sentence I had once given him. For the first time that day, I laughed softly. The following morning, Ruth took me to Valor House. The residents had learned enough to know the wedding investigation involved foundation money. They did not know every detail. A young former infantry sergeant named Caleb stood in the adaptive kitchen making pancakes with one hand. The counters had been lowered so he could cook from his wheelchair. "Colonel Arden," he said, "Ruth says you designed this place." "Many people designed it." "Did you pay for the first building?" "I helped." He placed a plate in front of me. "This kitchen is the first place I made breakfast without asking someone to reach a cabinet." I looked through the window toward the east wing. A blue tarp covered part of the roof. Rain had entered one bedroom the previous week. The repair money had purchased flowers, suits, and a private island reservation. Protecting Graham from embarrassment would not protect the residents. It would only preserve the system that made their needs available for his use. Through my attorney, I sent Graham a limited proposal. I would consider resigning from daily control if he returned every dollar, surrendered all records, and permanently withdrew from management. The employees would keep their salaries. The residents would remain protected. The wedding itself would not become the setting for a public arrest. Graham believed I was trying to save the family name. He sent a new resignation document that evening. It claimed I approved the wedding as a donor development event. It also stated that I allowed Graham to use my trustee key and accepted the previous living assistance payments. The document carried a date from 9 months earlier. His message read, "Sign tonight and we can call all of this a family advance." Imani examined the metadata. The document had been created that morning. The copied signature was added after my attorney sent the proposal. Graham had interpreted an opportunity to return the money as permission to create another lie. Mallory contacted investigators the next day. She surrendered her wedding budget emails and vendor messages. Graham had shown her statements from his consulting company to prove he funded the wedding. Those statements were altered. The original accounts contained the Valor House transfers. Mallory postponed the ceremony. She did not yet announce whether the engagement was over. "I need to know what he expected me to stand beside," she told Imani. The emergency court hearing began 1 week after the fitting. Graham testified that I resigned before any disputed withdrawal. He said my trustee key remained available for authorized administrative use. Judge Felicia Monroe opened the resignation document. "Mr. Arden, if Colonel Arden had already resigned, why did you use her active trustee key to approve every withdrawal?" "She gave me permission." "When?" "Before her hospitalization." The judge turned another page. "Then why does the surveillance video show you removing that key while she was hospitalized and returning it before she came home?" Graham glanced toward his attorney. The courtroom screen showed him opening the safe after midnight. His hand reached inside. My security key appeared between his fingers. The scar on my wrist had helped Luke recognize my name. The key in Graham's hand showed the court who had been living from it. Graham watched the courtroom screen as his own hand removed my security key from the safe. The video continued. He placed the device inside his jacket pocket, closed the safe, and left the office at 12:43 in the morning. 3 days later, the same camera recorded him returning the key. I was still at Walter Reed. Judge Felicia Monroe turned toward him. "You testified that Colonel Arden gave you permission before her hospitalization." "She did." "Was that permission written?" "No." "Was anyone present?" "No." "Then why did you remove the key after midnight rather than request it through the foundation office?" Graham leaned toward his microphone. "Joss trusted me to handle operations." "Did she trust you to sign her resignation?" He looked at his attorney. The judge waited. No, he said. Did she authorize you to describe her as cognitively impaired? I believed her injuries affected her judgment. Are you a physician? No. Did any physician reach that conclusion? No. Judge Monroe closed the surveillance report. Then your belief did not create medical evidence. Special Agent Imani Cross approached the front table. She placed my physical security key beside the blue ledger, the false resignation, the wedding contracts, and the records describing me as a dependent resident. The damaged Ranger coin rested at the edge of the display. Graham's attorney argued that Valor House benefited from the wedding because donors and military leaders had been invited. Imani opened the venue invoice. The contract describes a private wedding with restricted access. She turned to the guest list. Residents were not invited. Graham answered the event would have increased visibility. Why was it coded as wheelchair accessible residence modernization? That was an accounting decision. Whose? The finance office. Imani displayed an email. Graham had written, use the housing modernization code. Donors do not need to see wedding language in the quarterly report. His attorney stopped taking notes. Judge Monroe read the message silently. If the wedding was a donor event, why conceal the word wedding? Graham swallowed. We used the code temporarily. The judge opened the honeymoon invoice. And which wounded resident received the $87,000 overseas rehabilitation assessment? No one answered. Mallory took the witness seat. She wore no engagement ring. Imani asked whether she knew Valor House paid the vendors. No. What did Graham tell you? He said his consulting company had earned a large private contract. Did he describe the wedding as a foundation event? No. He said he did not want residents or donors involved because this was our personal day. Graham leaned toward his attorney. Mallory continued. He showed me bank statements proving he could afford everything. Imani displayed the originals beside the copies Graham gave her. The copies removed transfers from Valor House. The original records showed that his consulting company received $320,000 from the charity before paying wedding deposits and personal debts. Did you approve those transfers? Imani asked. No. Did you know Colonel Arden had supposedly authorized them? I believe Joss had nothing to do with the foundation anymore. Why? Graham said she was a former resident who struggled with memory after combat injuries. I kept my hands folded. Graham had not only erased me from Valor House, he had replaced me with a story designed to make every question I asked sound like confusion. Mallory looked toward me. I am sorry. I nodded once. Her apology did not belong at the center of the hearing. The records did. Ruth Delaney testified next. She described the property before it became Valor House. The first building had broken plumbing narrow doors and a roof damaged by years of storms. Who proposed the recovery community? Judge Monroe asked. Colonel Arden. Who funded the initial work? She did. How much? Nearly $900,000 plus her share of the land. Did Valor House own her cottage? No. Did the foundation provide her meals, transportation, or personal care? Never. Ruth opened my father's blue ledger. The earliest payments came from my savings and property sale. Each construction invoice was recorded by hand. The current system showed something different. Graham billed grant accounts every month for my supposed housing and care. The money entered companies he controlled. The judge compared the two records. The foundation received Colonel Arden's property and money, she said. Then it charged donors for supporting her. Ruth answered, "Yes, Your Honor." An independent auditor confirmed that more than $400,000 in false living assistance charges had been routed through Graham's accounts. The auditor also traced the wedding expenses. The flower contract was coded as therapeutic landscaping. Formal wear became adaptive occupational clothing. Photography became veteran outcomes documentation. The private island honeymoon became a rehabilitation site assessment. Every false label borrowed the language of recovery. None served a recovering soldier. The auditor displayed the East Wing roof estimate. $68,000. Repairs had been delayed twice. The wedding flowers cost more. Judge Monroe looked at Graham. You testified that these expenditures supported the mission of Valor House. They were part of donor development. Did the board approve them? Yes. Imani presented the supposed board minutes. One meeting occurred on a holiday when the office was closed. Another listed a director who was attending a conference in California. A third claimed Ruth was present while county records placed her at an emergency plumbing inspection. The signatures were copied from older documents. The meetings never happened. Who prepared these minutes, the judge asked. Graham answered administrative staff. Imani displayed the file history. The author account belonged to Graham. His shoulders lowered. The new resignation document came next. Its visible date said I had resigned 9 months earlier. The metadata showed it was created the morning after the fitting room confrontation. Graham's message appeared beside it. Sign tonight and we can call all of this a family advance. Judge Monroe read the sentence. You were not asking Colonel Arden to confirm an old agreement. Graham remained silent. You were asking her to create one after the withdrawals were discovered. He looked toward me. You told me you wanted to protect the residents. I did. You offered to leave. I offered you a chance to return what you took. You knew the foundation would collapse without me. Ruth answered before the judge could stop her. It was collapsing because of you. The judge warned everyone to speak only when recognized. Then Luke Brennan was called. He explained why he recognized my scar, but he did not describe Cedar Gate as a legend. He described a damaged helicopter, an injured team, and many people doing their assigned work under pressure. Did Colonel Arden ever tell you she founded Valor House? Imani asked. No. Did she ask you to call General Holloway? No. Why did you make the call? Because her brother described her as dependent and unimportant. I knew enough to believe the official record would say otherwise. Did the scar prove financial fraud? No. He looked toward the evidence table. The scar identified the person. The ledger proved the crime. Dana Holloway confirmed my rank, current assignment, and medical fitness. She also confirmed that no Army physician had declared me cognitively impaired. Graham interrupted. She has been in recovery care for years. Dana faced him. Recovery care is not incompetence. She cannot even use her left hand normally. She advises programs serving thousands of wounded personnel. She lives beside the foundation, on property she owns. Each answer removed another part of the character he had created for me. Graham turned toward Mallory. She knew the wedding would help fundraising. Mallory shook her head. You told me the foundation was finally successful because of you. You enjoyed every payment. I believed they were yours. He looked toward the auditor. Accounting chose the codes. The auditor displayed Graham's written instructions. He looked toward Ruth. She resented my authority. Ruth opened the original trust agreement. You had authority to administer the mission, not replace it with your wedding. Judge Monroe raised one hand. The room settled. She looked directly at Graham. Who was the freeloader, Mr. Arden? His face tightened. The woman who donated the property and nearly $900,000. The judge touched the wedding invoice. Or the man who billed wounded soldiers for his ceremony, clothing, honeymoon debts, and reputation. Graham offered no answer. I did not smile. Mallory's wedding was gone. My brother faced investigations that could end his career and take years from his life. Valor House residents had watched a person they trusted use their needs as invoice descriptions. Nothing about that deserved celebration. Justice can restore a record. It cannot return the years spent believing a lie. Judge Monroe removed Graham from all authority over Valor House. The accounts were placed under an independent receiver and forensic audit. Unspent wedding funds were frozen and recovered. The venue canceled the contract after learning the source of payment. The travel company returned the remaining honeymoon deposit. Mallory ended the engagement. She later provided additional emails and financial records. The evidence was referred for investigation involving charitable asset theft, federal grant fraud, forged board records, false medical claims, stolen authentication equipment, and transfers through a shell company. The false entries describing me as a dependent resident were removed. My cottage was formally confirmed as separate property. Valor House retained its land staff and residents. The east wing roof was repaired first. Graham wrote to me several months later. He said he had spent his life beneath my shadow. He believed nobody would see him if they knew what I had accomplished. I answered once. My service did not make you invisible. You hid behind it, then charged others for the shadow. I did not meet him privately. All communication went through attorneys. Shared blood did not require me to surrender evidence, safety, or boundaries. Possible forgiveness would depend on restitution, full acknowledgement, and change. That did not ask me to erase the record. I did not become Valor House's executive director. A qualified independent board took control. Ruth remained in charge of resident services. Every large payment required multiple approvals and outside review. My name returned to the founding documents, but it did not replace the residents' names on the walls. Valor House was never meant to become my monument. 1 year later, Luke volunteered there twice each month. He helped new residents navigate appointments, adaptive equipment, and the strange quiet after leaving operational units. The repaired East Wing reopened during a small ceremony. I wore a short-sleeved uniform shirt. I did not display the scar deliberately. I simply stopped hiding it to make other people comfortable. The damaged Ranger coin was placed inside a glass case near the original blue ledger. A small card beneath them read, "Recognition began with a scar. Justice came from the ledger." We also created the Scar Ledger Project. It helped wounded service members protect themselves when relatives, employers, or charities misused their injuries, benefits, names, or military histories. A young resident stopped me after the reopening. His right arm carried several surgical scars. "Does yours still hurt?" he asked. "Sometimes." Do you get tired of explaining it? Yes. He looked at the pale crescent across my wrist. What do you say when people ask? I thought about Luke recognizing the scar, Graham mocking it, and the records finally speaking. Pain is not the same thing as owing someone an explanation. My brother called me a freeloader while billing my survival as his generosity. He did not support my recovery. He invoiced it. 20 minutes did not change who I was. They only changed who was allowed to pretend otherwise. A scar records what the body refused to surrender. A ledger records who tried to profit from it. If someone uses your injury, service, disability, or name to collect money while telling others you are dependent, preserve the records. Recognition may begin with one visible clue, but accountability comes from documents that can be verified. I would be honored if you shared this story with someone whose sacrifice has been used against them, and join me again for another story about dignity, evidence, and the courage to stop hiding what survived.